Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're waiting on God, wondering when He will respond to your prayers? It's an experience we've all experienced regardless of our religious beliefs. A sense of anticipation, a longing for resolution, a thirst for our answers. Waiting, it seems, in today's climate is foreign. It's in these moments of waiting that we often find ourselves coming face to face with our own patience, or at times, the lack thereof. There's no denying it. Waiting demands patience. It's about letting go of the need for immediate gratification, about understanding that there's a time and place for everything, and sometimes the time is simply not now. But how do we cultivate this patience? How do we learn to wait gracefully, especially when we're waiting on something as significant as a response from God? In this video, we hope to peel back the understanding of how to wait on God. It's crucial to understand God's timing. It is not like ours. This simple truth holds the key to our peace and patience in the season of waiting. God's timing transcends human understanding. It operates beyond the confines of our limited perspective, beyond the ticking of the clock, beyond the turning of calendar pages. Let's look at some biblical examples where God's timing was always perfect, even when it didn't seem so to the people involved. Consider Abraham and Sarah, who were promised a son in their old age. This seemed nearly impossible to them, and yet, in God's perfect timing, their son Isaac was born. Their story reminds us that God's promises are never limited by human standards or timelines, and they are always true. Another example is the story of Joseph. He went through a series of unfortunate events, from being sold into slavery by his brothers to being wrongfully imprisoned. You might think, surely this can't be God's perfect timing, but when we see the bigger picture, we realize that all these events were necessary for Joseph to eventually become the second most powerful man in Egypt, thus saving many lives during a time of famine in his own family. Remember the story of Lazarus, whom Jesus intentionally waited to resurrect even when it seemed too late. This was a display of God's perfect timing, demonstrating His power over death and reinforcing the faith of His followers. These biblical stories are not just historical accounts, but timeless lessons of faith. They teach us that God's timing is not about convenience, but about His divine plan unfolding in its perfect time. God's timing often challenges our patience. It may even confuse us, but it always proves to be perfect. It is always in sync with His grand design. It's about the right things happening at the right time, not just for our good, but for the greater good. So as we wait, let's trust in His timing. Let's remember that He sees the full picture while we only see a fraction of it. Let's remember the words of the prophet Isaiah, who said, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord." Remember, His ways are higher than ours, and His timing is always perfect. Trust. Trust in God's plan, even when it's not clear to you. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and our relationship with God is no exception. When we're in the trails of waiting, trust becomes the anchor that keeps us steady, the glue that holds everything together. But how do we trust in a plan that we can't see, in a future that's unknown to us? Let's take a leaf from the pages of the Bible, from the lives of those who trusted in God during their waiting periods. Consider Moses, who led the Israelites out of Egypt. It was a long and arduous journey, fraught with danger and doubt. But Moses trusted in God's plan, leading his people to the promised land. Consider the woman with the issue of blood. In Mark 5, we find a scene that is prevalent throughout the Gospels. A large crowd has gathered around Jesus. People from all over the region rushed to Him and pressed against Him. In the crowd was a woman who had been suffering from chronic bleeding for 12 years. She had visited many doctors and had spent all she had on treatments. But instead of getting better, her condition worsened. Because of the nature of her illness, she was considered unclean according to the laws and traditions of the time. She was sick, broke, and an outcast. Yet because of her confident faith in Jesus, she was able to ignore the pain for a moment and ultimately take the risk that changed everything. Although the woman in this passage was unnamed, her story of faith is unforgettable and inspires us to never give up. She took a bold risk to believe in Jesus and His power. She stepped out of the shadows, made her way through the crowd, and told the whole truth so she could get closer to Jesus. and the Bible states that she was healed. It would have been easy for them to lose faith, to question God's goodness, but they trusted in God's plan and power, even when it seemed impossible. These individuals and many others in the Bible trusted God during their waiting periods. They faced trials and tribulations. They experienced moments of doubt and despair, but they held on to their trust in God's plan, and in the end they witnessed the fulfillment of His promises. Trusting in God's plan is not about blind faith. It's about believing that He has a purpose for our lives, even when we can't see it. If He did one time before, why not trust Him to do it again? It's about understanding that His ways are higher than our ways, His thoughts higher than our thoughts. So in the midst of your waiting, hold on to trust. Trust in God's plan, even when it's not clear to you. Even when the path ahead seems uncertain, even when the future seems unclear, trust in His plan. Because God is faithful and He will fulfill His promises in His perfect timing. Trust in God's plan and remember that He works all things together for our good. Let's discuss patience. Remain patient and faithful in your waiting period. As we journey through life, there are moments when we feel as though we're stuck in a holding pattern, waiting for the clouds to part and for the sun to shine on us again. In these moments, the virtues of patience and faithfulness become our most trusted companions. Patience is more than just a virtue, it's a discipline. It's the ability to endure discomfort without complaint, to bear provocation without retaliation, to face adversity without despair. It's the kind of quiet strength that allows us to wait on God's timing, secure in the knowledge that His plans are always worth the wait. But patience alone is not enough. It must be accompanied by faithfulness, a steadfast commitment to remain true to God, even in the face of delay or disappointment. Faithfulness is not about denying our feelings of frustration or impatience. Rather, it's about choosing to trust in God's promises despite them. It's about having the courage to say, even though I don't understand why I'm waiting, I trust that God has a purpose for my wait. In the Bible, we find numerous examples of individuals who demonstrated remarkable patience and faithfulness while waiting on God. Consider the story of Zechariah and Elizabeth. God showed His faithfulness with Zechariah and Elizabeth by working to bless their lives even after they waited a long time for a son. Zechariah and Elizabeth lived by faith with the conviction that God loved them and wanted to bless them. They had the desire to stay righteous while they waited for their longings to be fulfilled. When we experience periods of waiting, we can have hope by remembering God's faithfulness and choosing to live by faith ourselves. So if you find yourself in a season of waiting, take heart, embrace patience, cultivate faithfulness. Use this time to deepen your relationship with God, to grow in your understanding of His character, and to strengthen your trust in His promises. Patience and faithfulness not only bring peace in your waiting period, but also deepen your relationship with God. Lastly, engage in prayer and worship while you wait. Now we're diving into a truly transformative part of the waiting process. Prayer and worship are not just idle activities, they're powerful tools that can bring comfort and clarity in times of uncertainty. Prayer is your direct access to God. It's a sacred conversation where you can express your deepest hopes, fears, and desires. It's a time where you can be genuine and vulnerable, knowing that you're speaking to a God who listens and cares for you. Through prayer, you can share your thoughts and feelings about your waiting period, asking for strength, patience, and guidance. Prayer also allows you to listen. In the quiet moments after you've poured out your heart, you can tune in to God's voice. It's in these moments that you may find the reassurance you need, the peace that surpasses all understanding, and the wisdom to navigate the waiting period. Next, let's talk about worship. Worship is more than just singing songs or attending church services. It's an act of love and devotion towards God. It's acknowledging His greatness and expressing gratitude for His goodness. Worship can bring comfort in the waiting. As you focus on God's attributes, His love, His faithfulness, His wisdom, you're reminded of His capability to handle whatever you're waiting for. The worry lessens, the anxiety fades, and you find a sense of peace amidst the unknown. Engaging in prayer and worship doesn't mean the waiting becomes easy, but it does become more bearable. These practices keep you grounded, remind you of your faith, and foster a deeper connection with God. They help you remain hopeful and positive even when the waiting seems unending. And remember, Prayer and worship not only keeps you connected with God, but it also helps you remain hopeful and positive. To sum up, waiting on God involves understanding His timing, trusting in His plan, remaining patient and faithful, and engaging in constant prayer and worship. We have to understand that God's timing may not always align with our own. Yet it's essential to trust that His plan is perfect, even when it feels elusive or uncertain. Staying patient and faithful can feel like a tall order in the midst of life's storms, but it's during these times that our faith is truly tested and often strengthened. Engaging in prayer and worship, not as a last resort, but as a first response, can bring peace and clarity during the wait. Apply these principles during your waiting period. Let them be your guidepost and your comfort. The road may be long and the journey tough, but remember, you're not alone. Remember, God is never late, never early, but always on time. Keep the faith, maintain patience, and your answer will come.